You're listening to Copper and Heat, the podcast exploring the unspoken rules and traditions of restaurants. I'm Katie Osuna. This past year has been tumultuous, to say the least. With the restaurant industry being one of the hardest hit by the COVID-19 pandemic, we wanted to create something to help others in hospitality navigate the challenges made worse by the pandemic. We've spent the last several months talking to experts so we could bring you a season with practical tips, tools, and resources. We're calling it Pre-Shift.
My first fine dining job cooking, I remember the first night on my own cleaning my station. My chef, very talented man, I was not cleaning fast enough. And he was just standing at the end of the line. We're closed. I'm halfway into a low boy just trying to scrub it out and everything. And he's screaming and yelling at me and just berating the shit out of me. And I was 19 at that point, I think, and on the verge of tears because just yelling and screaming at me. I'm like, I'm scrubbing as fast as I can. I'm trying.
This is how a lot of us who work in restaurants are used to receiving feedback from our managers. Getting berated during service, a tray of messed up mise en place going into the garbage, etc. Why is this the go-to means of communication for us?
Feedback is so tough in the service industry because it's so fast-paced.
This is Zach Ferguson.
My name is Zach Ferguson. I'm the host of Restaurant Tales podcast and spent many years in the service industry, and now I work in wine distribution. It's not an industry where you fuck up and somebody says, hey, I need you to come in my office tomorrow at this time. We'll talk about this. That's not an option. That feedback has to come right then. If you're on the line and you mess something up, there's not time to, be like, okay, well, let's sit down and talk about this. It just doesn't exist. And I think that's where some of our issues with feedback come from in the service industry. There's not time to process, and so we just lash out.
There's no doubt that the way we give and receive feedback right now kind of sucks. Fortunately, it doesn't have to be that way. Zach is a great example of that. For this first pre-shift, we're talking about why it's so hard for us in hospitality to give and receive feedback effectively, and how we can do the work to be better. To better understand how to give and receive feedback, we need to understand first why we are so terrified of making mistakes in the first place in the industry, and why we're so obsessed with perfection. Here's Zach again.
That across the board just comes down to self-preservation. And especially in an industry where you can walk out at any time and go find another job. On the flip side of that, you can be fired at any time and they'll find somebody to replace you right away. And you know that. And so I think that heightens some of those responses that anyone has, in that kind of a situation. It heightens it even more because you don't know. You can have that angry manager just be like, fine, fuck you, get out of here.
This comes down to something called psychological safety. What psychological safety is the notion that you feel safe enough in your workplace to take risks and make mistakes without fearing a negative consequence, which is a rarity for us. Even if our current workplace does not have a culture of threatening or yelling, there's still sometimes this pressure of perfectionism. So this part is for managers and others in position of leadership. We have to normalize feedback and develop those systems of communication.
And this again, comes down to communication.
This is Laura Green. She is a licensed professional therapist and also happens to have spent a lot of time as a bartender and manager in the hospitality industry.
Coming to an agreement with the parties who are engaging and providing feedback of we want to be able to provide each other feedback. If you have questions for me, if you have questions for me after I give this, or we can talk about this, how did that feel receiving that feedback, whatever that looks like, and normalizing what that's going to look like, and also committing to providing feedback and receiving feedback are really great ways to create better systems of communication within the workplace.
What that could look like is providing positive feedback frequently without using it as a padding for criticism. Or if you're a manager, asking employees for feedback on a regular basis. It could also be implementing monthly or weekly quick performance reviews. If the whole team is on board with having these regular check-ins, it first of all normalizes giving and receiving feedback, like Laura said, so it doesn't feel so scary when it happens. And second, it's a set time to sit down and talk about improvements, rather than bottling something up for weeks and then it explodes out during a particularly frustrating service.
Feedback is a gift. Someone told me once that feedback is a gift. And it absolutely changed my perspective on feedback, on growth, on failure, on mistakes.
This is something that Laura talks about a lot in her work. And it's the essential difference between having what's called a fixed mindset or a growth mindset. Having a fixed mindset means that you believe your skills, personality traits, and other characteristics are fixed, that you can't change them. People with a fixed mindset generally have a really hard time accepting any sort of feedback because they see it as a personal attack. Whereas someone with a growth mindset believes that they can always learn to do better. And that means taking feedback and criticism as a chance to grow.
I mean, I think we think criticism and suddenly it's a bad thing, but critique is not a bad thing. Reframing that as opportunity of like, oh, so this is something that isn't working. Now I know that what I'm doing is affecting someone this way or affecting the situation this way or whatever. So now it's an opportunity to try something new so that it works better, so that our relationship is better, so that we communicate better. So I'm better. So I'm more functional. So I'm more prepared, or, whatever that looks like. But it's really easier said than done, and it does take a lot of emotional work and, coming back to that humility and vulnerability.
So we need to unlearn what we've been taught. From the moment Zach was in a kitchen, he was learning behaviors from his superiors, like the chef that was yelling at him to clean his lowboy faster. Throughout the years, he continued to provide feedback the way he'd been taught, until it all came to a head.
We were doing a small catering event. I was like, oh, it's going to be easy. We're fully staffed. It's a Tuesday night. Like, this is going to be a cakewalk. I was planning on taking this food down to this small catering event in 2 trips in my car. We had, I think, 2 cooks call out, and I think we were down to 2 then at that point on the line. And shit just hit the fan. We were just disgustingly busy for a Tuesday night, just, for normal service, like out of the blue. Nobody would have expected that. So I go, first one comes out on time from the kitchen. I'm like, glory, hallelujah, fuck yeah. Take it down. I'm like, cool guys, I will be back in 5 minutes and I need the rest of that food up, when I get here, and I'm just going to grab it and go. I don't know what happened in what probably ended up being like 10 minutes in all reality. Because when I came back, they just hadn't even started on like the rest of it. And I was like, guys, like, I need the rest. And they're like, oh, we thought you needed this like later. Like, this wasn't like right this second you needed this. I'm like, that's not what I said. I said I'm coming back in like 10 minutes. Like, did you guys look at the BEO? And I lost my ever living shit. I had my sunglasses on. I like ripped my sunglasses off. I threw them. I'm like, what the fuck is going on? And just the absolute worst possible situation. One of the cooks was like, fuck you, I'm out. And just quit on the spot. And rightfully so. I would have too. I was absolutely horrible. And that I think that's one sticks out to me a lot because that's the only time I've ever had somebody respond in that way. And that's also the moment where I was like, this isn't good. This is not healthy for anybody. And also, how dare I treat another human being like that way?
I think most of us can relate to Zach. We have been taught that dealing with mistakes by yelling is the most effective way to give feedback and therefore get what we need. But it's not the most effective way, clearly. We all have to unlearn these habits, which takes a lot of time. Even Zach had to work through this.
I think it starts with us in the sense that being able to receive feedback with grace and with curiosity and with determination then teaches us how to provide feedback better and examining how we feel when we are given feedback, but accepting the feedback, thanking someone for the feedback, and then taking some time to process it. And not just process what it was that they gave you, but process how you felt receiving it, and, starting to really examine, like, I stopped listening to what they were saying because I got so defensive that I shut down, or why is it that when I receive feedback from this person, I don't take it well, but I can receive feedback from this person and I listen. What's up with that? As being curious about like why you react the way you do to feedback, you personally, like you. And then thinking of like, okay, so maybe I think I prickle to this person because maybe I don't like the way that they talk to me. I don't think that they talk to me in a constructive way. I think they just want to point fingers and blame. And that's a different kind of communication. And then examining maybe how you provide feedback then creates a healthier and more helpful situation.
For Zach, the turning point in how he provided feedback was that incident where a line cook walked out during service. And since then, he's made an active effort to unlearn what he's been taught and relearn more effective forms of communication.
In reality, it comes down to, I used to have a manager that would always just, anytime we'd start getting in the weeds, back in the day, he'd be like, it's just food and booze. It's just food and booze. And we were operating at a very high level. And so it was not just food and booze. But he'd always just be like, it's just food and booze. It's okay. That phrase started being something that would come up a lot more for me because it forces you to take a step back and remove yourself from the situation. Because that's where I found I provided the worst feedback to my employees, was when I also am trying to hold all my shit together for our guests and, present a forward-facing fantastic picture of, the nice guy. And I'm here. I'm going to talk about your wine with you. And, oh, yeah, of course. I love talking about Burgundy. Let's do that. And then on the other hand, know that we're just getting crushed. And those are the moments where I'm going to be the one who's going to be like, the fuck are you doing? And that was kind of the big thing for me that really started changing things, was being aware of myself enough to know that in those situations, I cannot actually provide the feedback. Outside of addressing what needs to actually be addressed right then, everything else can't be discussed. We're always, during service especially, we have a checklist in our mind that's just constantly rotating and adjusting based on what's important in that second. And so like to stick something right in the middle of that and say, stop, is really fucking difficult, but also really fucking necessary to react in a healthy manner. And it really does just take us stepping outside of the situation that we're in that moment, remembering what needs to be talked about, and addressing that later in a more appropriate situation than smack in the middle of, Friday night.
It's not a one-size-fits-all. We can't tell you this is how you provide feedback. But you can process all this for yourself, test different methods of coping, and actively ask for feedback on how you provide feedback. It's all about creating that space where everyone feels comfortable sharing their opinions and feelings.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I'm happy that people didn't write me off because of, the poor interactions that I had, and allowed me to adjust, learn, and move on with my life as well and get better.
Head over to our Instagram page to check out the IG Live next Monday, where we'll be going more in depth and answering your questions about proactive communication around feedback and conflict in the workplace. Even if you're listening to this well after we post the episode, the video is still on our IGTV at Copper and Heat. You'll be hearing more from Laura again in more episodes throughout this season, but she also has a ton of resources online. Check her out.
I'm on Instagram, but I'm really bad at Instagram. I'm just generally bad at the internet, so please forgive me. But I'm at healthy.pour. But my website is healthypour.org. So yeah, that's where you can find me.
And if you'd like to hear more from Zach, he's got a great podcast that he hosts with a couple other friends all about the restaurant industry called Restaurant Tales. They had me on the show, and we had a great time drinking and talking about all sorts of things. The link is in the show notes. We've put a bunch more resources in the show notes and on our website, copperandheat.com, about fixed versus growth mindsets, criticism, and feedback so that you can dig in a little more. Trust me, it'll make a world of difference in your workplace. If you haven't already done it, hit the subscribe button in your podcast app. Then you can keep up with all of our new episode releases throughout the season. Even better, share this with a friend. Pre-Shift, the third season of Copper and Heat, is produced by me, Katie Osuna. Our story editor is Rachel Palmer. Our sound engineer and composer is Ricardo Osuna. Thanks for listening.